Good afternoon, Cynthia. How are you?
I'm very well indeed, Kate. And you land, lovely to see you both.
And we have Martine joining us too. So it's just a very intimate Friday evening with an amazing magazine, if you can call it that. What are you calling this? What, a booklet?
It's kind of, yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because magazine isn't all that fitting anymore. It's kind of more than that. It's a book. Let's just call it a book.
Book. Can I call it a book? I'm so happy to call it a book because it is a book. And it's shaped like a book and it's the most intriguing book. And the intrigue starts on the first page when you're invited to peek inside. It's so beautifully produced and it has some Sanskrit at the bottom here of the Y, and I'm really keen to know what that Sanskrit actually says.
Oh, Kate. Excuse me, absolutely. I am sorry. I've got a little bit of a itchy throat. But let's see. Look, the word huge is ultimately yoga. It means yoga.
Hmm.
But maybe I start with the actual reflection on the 10-year journey. Can I start there and then work into what yoke is?
Yes, absolutely. And so this Sanskrit word actually says yut, does it?
Huge.
Yut.
Huge. Yeah, which means yoga, which means to unite, to come together, to join the infinite and the finite. Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah.
Please, I want to know everything about this last 10-year journey because this is a celebration, isn't it? It's a 10-year celebration of Yoke, which was a magazine but is now a book. Yeah.
Kate, and I have to say thank you to you too, because you've been there supporting for the entire duration. I'm going to change my view to gallery so I don't keep looking at myself and being distracted. So excuse me. But ultimately, as I sit and reflect on my 10 years, and it has been 10 years since we've known each other, Kate, you have a tremendous ability to hold space and to really support, and I really appreciate that. And my dog is barking. Hello, do you want to get out? Do you want to leave? One moment.
Life. And here's another dog, just while we're waiting. Hazel, say hello to everyone.
Just
Because
raising hands. So sweet.
about what we do here at Soul Advisor is we're keeping it real. There's nothing schmaltzy or shiny about it. That is not what we're doing. We're talking about the essence of what we all do, which is healing, which is totally living in the moment. And here we are in a doggy moment. So carry on.
Moment, thank you. So I guess look, in a way, this 10-year edition, as I reflect on the 10 years, I return to the seed. And the truth is, it was never really born out of this kind of serenity or even peace. And it wasn't crafted with, a 5-year plan or even a strategy. It was born out of rage. And you may remember that, Kate, because we met at the very first issue, about 11, 12 years now. But I guess, a deep ache that rose from watching the world feed this really hollow sense of well-being, its version of well-being and its version of creativity and its version of beauty and even truth. And those versions, they felt curated to me. They felt completely curated and commodified and disconnected from the sacred, I guess. And I had been practicing Ashtanga yoga for a few years before then, and although it hadn't been that long, but it became a lifeline for me, yoga. And I was living in this pain body physically and emotionally, trying to find ground and also trying to heal, and yoga opened that door for me. But it was actually creativity that became the path, and this hunger emerged, just at the same time, yoga and creativity became kind of this partnership, and it was not just for wellness. Actually, it was for something much deeper, for a life of truth, for to live in rhythm, to live in purpose. And I guess we call that Dharma, right? And many Vedic teachers remind us of that. And I guess our Dharma is not a job as such. It's certainly, for me, I don't think of Dharma in that way. It's the current of our soul, really, moving and moving through time, I guess, right? And I think it's our sacred duty, in fact, to live in Dharma and to align with that current. And when we do, I think life becomes a transmission, not just an experience. So for me, it was about survival. It was about being well. It was learning how to listen more deeply. And yoga and creativity really gave me that. They were the key. In fact, as I sit in reflection, I have done a lot of writing around where I've landed 10 years on. And I think what's important, and I want to share this, is that I had these questions, these burning questions that just kept, coming up and wouldn't leave me. And one was, what is well-being? What is well-being when it's not being sold back to us? The other one was around beauty, like what is beauty when it isn't, curated for consumption? And what becomes of creativity when the world isn't protecting it? And to me, it's interesting because consciousness and creativity were those words that everybody was using, and I tried really hard not to use it, but creativity really was the door that opened up for me. And if we look at those questions, I guess that's where Yoke was born. That's where it was seeded, and that's where Yoke was born. So no, it's not a magazine as such. In truth, it never really sat comfortably, as a magazine on the shelves. Certainly next to glossy covers and trend-based mags. It's always been something else. And so for me, it was about creating a container, something sacred, a little bit rebellious, and of course nourishing. So, and I guess the categories, what I will share is the categories that emerged in the pages just naturally through that, was art, was ritual, was resistance, was activism, was beauty, was truth. And there was it never really neatly sat anywhere. So hence how I've kind of got this magazine that's now turned into something a little bit more robust in terms of its in terms of where it can sit. And I think, when I started this conversation around Yoke, we weren't really talking consciousness in a way as we are now. And I think, consciousness and creativity are kind of the new black. So I don't know, maybe I was ahead of my time.
That's absolutely for sure, and you still are. So, like the fact of the matter is, what I love about what you do, Cynthia, and why we're friends, and why I'm so proud of having you as a friend, is because it's about realness. You were looking at wellness, and what does it actually mean when it's not sold back to us? That's what you just said. Like, it is being sold back to us in so many guises that we don't understand, or that disrupt our whole being. Like the fact that, like, even today I received a proposal that was talking about the wellness industry, the tourism wellness industry ballooning out to let me just get the figures right. I think the figure was 351 billion and soon to be 2 trillion in 2040. So, those figures and wellness to me just don't fit they won't fit. And it really disturbs my field to have that, because wellness comes inside out. And the thing that this beautiful book has done all of these years, the last 10 years as a magazine or a book, is to take people's stories and examine them from the inside coming out into the world. It's a really beautiful, essential depiction of where people are coming from. And I love that you're so into the essence. It seems to me that Yoke is your essence. It's really like looking at, as you described, here's your situation. You were in despair, you were in anger, and you needed to find a resolution. And what you've done is provide a platform for many people to come forward and talk about how they went through that process and what creative process they eventuated with and what they created as a result. So it's a very, very heartfelt production that you've done here.
Yes, thank you, Kate. Yeah, I mean, having as I said, reflected back, we're always asked to articulate why we do what we do, particularly when you're sharing as, an editor. And I do want to share, actually, because, Yoke, in its soul driven, purpose-led way, when I really look at it, there are key deep wounds in our culture that I guess I was trying to address, and one of them is, and you know this well, and you probably agree with all of them, but the disconnection from our inner and earth wisdom. Like that to me was like number one, like where are we, in this fast, and this was 10 years ago, this kind of fragmented mind in which the world is running faster, and we are losing touch with our inner lives and our traditions and our ancient wisdom and traditions, and the earth itself. And so that was one. And the other one was the marginalization of the feminist and the decolonial voices, and oh, Jesus, I hate mainstream media sometimes. And it continues to sideline those voices, right? It is about, especially women. It sidelines women, it sidelines First Nations, it sidelines queer and those intersectional voices, like, so that was two. And three is the wellness as commodity and not a practice. And, having spent a lot of time in India and having done yoga, particularly Ashtanga yoga, and fortunate enough to have, many amazing teachers, wellness has become this kind of curated aesthetic. And I was just too often devoid of the depths of the ethics, I guess, and the sacredness of a practice, so they were the three things. And I love like, being able to now articulate that. Of course, back then, 10 years ago, I was never really led from that place to be able to articulate in this way. And the other thing I do want to mention is the feminine, because 10 years on, I knew that there had to be another print edition, not mag. There had to be another print edition because I love print. And I also knew that it was time because undeniably, that this is one that had to be about women and about the feminine. And not the feminine, as a branding, because of course, the feminine spirit is also quite an extraordinary thing that we're actually speaking it out loud in this way again, but it's the feminine as the force and the kind that births worlds and burns through illusion, and I'll say this as a kind of really beautiful alchemy, and I don't know how far into the pages you've gone, but without summoning her name too loudly, Kali arrived. She moved through the initial submissions and the stories and the art, and landed in a way that really excited me. And her pulse is in these pages, you know, as not as a symbol of fear, more about truth, you know. And in my editor's note, I actually do write of this moment we're living in, you know, in some way. Some say we're living inside the chaos of the Kali Yuga, right? And some say that we've pushed past it. So whatever side of the spiral you're sitting on, you know, the ancient prophecies are clear that the feminine is rising, and with her Kali, you know, the mother and the destroyer, and she doesn't gently soothe, you know. She clears, she cuts, she dismantles,
It
and
is.
I love that.
Yeah, I love that too. And I think, this is magazine book for its time because we're in the middle of that, aren't we? We're in the middle of the mass reorganization, the mass tearing down, the mass confusion, the mass whatever you want to call it. There's room for every single voice, and they're all yelling at the moment. And, what you've done is create a beautiful mag that really, really highlights that feminine impulse and what that adds to the whole story that we're doing right now. It's fabulous. Yeah. I wonder if there's, this it's so full. It's quite a thin book, but it's got so much in it. It's got all these stories. And I love within these pages how much focus you've brought to First Nations, how much focus you've brought to the whole India that you love, uh,
Mm,
Cynthia, and how much focus you've brought to an incredible range of artists and creators that should be known more.
yes, right. I know. Like, I'm always so shocked that when I speak of certain artists or writers that, in Sydney, of course, you know, because the majority of them are local, um, that people don't really know. And I'm excited by being able to share new voices, new faces, and geez, you know, we're full of talent, aren't we, here in this country? And yes, there are other, well, obviously, you know, international people that we also feature. And it kind of kept growing. The deputy editor, Dominique Antarakis, was just like, you know, it kind of started off as a retrospective, quickly turned into something else, a reclamation, you know, if you like. And in many ways, it kind of just grew organically when I'd put my mind to it. In fact, you probably behind me see all the pages up there, you know. It was quite a delight when I put them up there, and then I went, oh, now we have to get a printing quote and see how much it's going to cost. You know, so in many ways it was a beautiful unfolding, and it was a really hard place to go. You know, I want to tell that story, but I don't want to tell that story, and you know, I just couldn't do that. And of course, we did pull in some other really beautiful women from previous issues, like Min Maya, who you introduced me to, Kate. And you know, when I said to her, I sent her an email saying we're doing another issue, and you know, we'd like to feature that again and maybe ask you a few more questions. She was over the moon, and I was just like, oh God, I thought you'd forgotten about me, you know. But you know, and that co-creation in a way, right? Because that's what we're doing together. We're collaborating, and her face is always with me, you know. So it was just beautiful to bring her back. Um,
And so beautiful to be asked, thank you, to write in this book.
You did too, yes. How cool is that? Well, actually, you and Yolande did that. You went off and you sat down at Miriam's feet and you told shared stories.
Yeah, Dr. Miriam Rose or Auntie or what
Of
Miriam
course,
Rose,
yes.
etc., who was given the award, the Australian of the Year award back in, oh, it must be 2 years ago. Oh, it might have been 3 by now. Anyway, she has done an incredible job within our culture, hasn't she? Introducing the whole concept of deep listening, from a very, very beautiful First Nations perspective, Didiri.
Mm.
And a joy to be able to share our time up there with her on land, on country. Yeah, really, really amazing. But yes, so tell me a little bit more about why you have named this an experiment with destiny. I mean, I can glean from what you've been saying thus far why, but I'd like to hear it from the horse's mouth. Please.
Yes. So why the title? I guess the phrase "an experiment with destiny" came to me during a guided meditation with Joe Dispenza, and it just dropped in like a seed. And it was quiet and it was potent, but it never left me. And it struck something immediate, I guess, in a way. It felt like a remembering, which has kind of been the theme, and in fact, one of the sections of this edition. And it captured, I guess it captured what Yoke was, at its core. It was a question, it was a quest, it was a sacred experiment, and in many ways, it was an easy thing to just kind of go, that's the name of it. I never ran it past anybody. I just kind of named it.
Because you didn't have to. It's your book.
Well, I do work with a deputy editor and a designer, so I'm not on my own. When you are kind of working on your own, you're not always very sure. Sometimes you've got a great idea, but it's not really a great idea, and all of that. But for me, it was really clear that was, and each issue has always been themed. The first issue was around love and loss. The second one was about balance. The third one was gather, and the last one was around duty. And so I didn't really want to do that again this time. I wanted it to be a more expansive feel around, I didn't want to have the same sections in there. So there were some obvious things that I did differently. But ultimately, an experiment with destiny talks to, how do we, I just kicked my dog under the table. How do we do better, to ourselves and each other and the planet? And what happens when we choose to create not from ego or even expectations, but from within, and when we let spirit shape us, and when we let story move through us.
Well, you certainly have. I wonder if there's any part of this that you would like to share with us or read, or just give us a little bit of a flavor. Do you feel to?
Look, I guess, one of the things that I really wanted to share was kind of this thread on India, because like you both sat at the feet of an amazing, elder.
Yeah.
I kind of love that idea of telling story and maybe in a way a bit of a frustrated journalist. I've never studied journalism, but I love having conversation and extracting a story. And I guess on India, the thread, the living thread, is that it felt really natural, inevitably, really, because this edition does carry a thread of India, and that came from a place where, Kate, my soul place, India. It came from that place of me interviewing a few women back, I think, in 2016, quite a few women, in fact, because I was doing an issue out of India. And that just laid there for ages. I did nothing with them. And I always went back to them, I kind of ran it past a few journalists, writers who were like, yeah, no, this has legs. It's got, it needs some work, but never did anything with them. They were recorded. So I had them transcribed and just, they sat there for a while. And so when this, was in the making, I was just like, well, I have to pull in India. It's just, it's a land of pilgrimage, it's breathtaking beauty and it's deep devotion, and let's face it, yoga was born in India. And so, in many ways, I had to include it. And so, India does show up in here. And Arundhati, says, Arundhati Roy says that India lives in several centuries at the same time. And it's so true. You know, India initiates you. It's kind of this, it's just so humbling. It kind of just breaks you open. And so in this 10-year edition, excuse me, we honour her and, as a living teacher. And one of the sections is called Journey and Grace Out of India, and it's a deep dive into the sacred feminine through India's ancestral practices. And maybe I just read that.
Yes, I'd love you to.
Okay.
And yeah, really love you to. And let's talk about India.
Okay. Okay. And I'm going to put my torch on because what's interesting about looking at the size of font as you get older, you're like, oh, maybe that wasn't such a good idea. So here we go. Mother India is vast, intricate tapestry with many faces, where the threads of the ancient and current intertwine. It is a place where the land hums with the weight of stories that stretch back millennia, and where the air feels heavy with the scent of possibility and chance encounters. It is a country where the soul can find sustenance in the beauty of its people, its colour, and its wild paradoxes. Within this tapestry lives three extraordinary women whose lives and works are themselves acts of transformation. These women defy the silence imposed on them by history, society, and tradition, not through rebellion for its own sake, but by singing new harmonies into old songs, by fortifying the structures they inherited with the electric power of their own voices. Arundhati Subramaniam is a poet of exquisite clarity and depth who moves between worlds, the divine and the human, the ancient and the contemporary. Her words are at once bridges and mirrors, connecting us to forgotten women, mystics, while holding up a reflection of our own yearning. Pravati Baul, a keeper of Bengal's Baul tradition, carries centuries of sacred songs within her, but she is no mere vessel for the past. In a practice historically dominated by men, she dares to be both disciple and innovator, weaving a feminine presence into the spiritual and artistic lineage she stewards. And then there is Rupi Kaur, whose journey began at a humble local open mic, and whose poetry excuse me, and whose poetry has since crossed borders. Through her art and activism, she reclaims vulnerability and strength, offering solace and empowerment to millions of women and young girls across the world. These women are rewriting their worlds, not by erasing what came before, but by showing us how the past can magically continue to pulse with lasting transformation. They are charting a path for future generations of female artists and thinkers, reminding us that tradition is not a fixed monument, but a living, breathing conversation that asks us to imagine not just what has been, but what might yet be, a future shaped by women's voices, boundless in their possibility and potency.
That's a skillful bit of writing that is there.
Thanks. I do have a deputy editor.
And it was all your own words. I can hear you. And you're taking people to India. This is what about Yoke is that it takes the magazine, the book, and then it extends it into community. So with your long dinners, with your additions to festivals that happen, with now, a retreat in India, over to Bali, etc., etc., it breathes life into community and what people have to say and share. So tell us a little bit about what you're going to do. You're taking a tour to India?
Yes, I love that. Thanks, Kate. I always wanted to bring pages to life in some way, and I just kind of go, oh my God, how did I get here? But it was something that it was always intentional. And now I'm thrilled to share that the thread is unfurling beyond the pages, and into a lived experience, like you said. And this October, I travel, excuse me, to the Marwar region in Rajasthan with a small group of women, and we're staying in a 500-year-old ashram nestled in the desert. And we gather for Utsavama, which is a festival of women where meets East. And we're coming together in ceremony and ecology and devotion and song and ritual. And the festival itself actually draws from the principles of yoga and the 8 limbs, and it honors the land as the teacher. And I visited there I participated in the festival six years ago. And so to be able to bring this journey to life really, really excites me. Yeah. So I guess it's about, I guess it's why really in many ways I created Immersions Unyoked. And, it was a space to remember and to come undone and to walk the sacred ground in sisterhood, and our first immersion, in fact, was with Suzanne Sterling, the co-founder, from Off the Mat into the World. And she was our first teacher for our first immersion in Bali back in 2024. I'm not teaching per se, I'm just hosting. And yeah, so yes. And in many ways, there's still space to join us if anyone's keen to know more, they can reach out to me. But India's always been my soul place.
As somebody that has background in Malta, you look so Indian.
I think it's the nose ring.
Even with the nose ring and the head wobble and the whole thing.
It might be. Yeah. Yes. And, I think what's so beautiful about living in a place too, particularly like India, there's so many faces, so many different faces of India. But what's beautiful is all the friendships that I've made, and I feel really honored to just be able to travel in that way and to meet other extraordinary humans, who are now my friends. Um, hmm.
Gorgeous. You have so many friends, Cynthia. It's an incredible network, and I'm really excited to share our network with your network. So let's hope that we can bring a lot of attention to everything that you're doing and have done and will do. And I wonder if I might invite either you, Yolande, or Martine, if there's any other aspects of this conversation you'd like to bring up.
I only want to say that it's just so fabulous. And I just think you have such an amazing, unique talent that's unapologetically raw and just shouts above everything mediocre out there. And I just love your book, and I shared it with my daughter, and she's very edgy and young, and she was like, oh my God, this is so fabulous. And I think it's just what the world needs. And I'm so grateful that you're out there doing it.
Thank you. That's quite a compliment. Thank you, Yolande.
More of that, please. Yes, more. Keep going. Martine.
So I'm just wondering, like in the book, do you share story like real stories about different women? Like I'm not quite clear how the book is structured or what's in there.
Well, it's over 50 women, and these women are creatives, they're spiritual leaders, they're artists, they're writers, and ultimately it's broken into 6 sections. But what it's doing is just raising awareness around how we can do things better. ultimately. And, you know, in a nutshell, it's kind of that creativity and consciousness for change. And the activism piece is a really big piece. Outside of, like, you know, talking about how the doom and gloom of life, it's not that at all. It's about how are women in the world harnessing their gifts, and it's done through art and, you know, poetry and you know, word. And so for me, it's about curating and telling stories through the power of how women are actually showing up in the world, I guess. That's, yeah.
Wow, sounds amazing. Yeah, that's what we need. Creativity is badly needed. Yeah, well done. Well done. Looking forward to check this book.
Yes. And we're actually
Excellent.
offering 30% off, aren't we, Kate?
Yes, it's a beautiful thing. Thank you for your generous spirit, Cynthia. Because
Thank you.
these stories
Excellent.
to be told, and our profession as healers is primarily female. Hopefully it won't be
Mm.
forever. Hopefully it will move into a more balanced perspective. But currently, every time we run anything, hello, we're all women. So it's a beautiful thing. And to celebrate that fact, Cynthia's offering 30% off the cost of this gorgeous book. And you'll see that, Martin, because I'll send it out to you, and we'll be putting it alongside the podcast and on our website, etc., etc. And I hope people take the opportunity to be inspired, because, you know, we've all got an incredible purpose in being alive. And these women have told their story really, really well. It's very inspiring.
Beautiful.
It's worth sharing too that independent print, you know, independent publishing is a thing. You know, I mean, there's no advertising in this at all, and I wanted it to be that for the obvious reason. I didn't want to be held to deadlines or even, you know, an organization. But we did do what we did do, Kate. Do you remember, with Off the Mat into the World? In a creative way, it was like, all right, how do we bring on some partners? And so the first two issues I actually funded myself, and then realized that was really stupid. Not in a way that it just wasn't sustainable. So then what we did is we partnered with the Sydney Fringe, and we brought in partners like Off the Mat into the World. And they paid to be in the magazine, but they also worked with us to bring the pages to life. And so Kate and I, we did this beautiful thing at the Wayside Chapel. And this is, you know, the gratitude. I just think, wow, I would never have expected to be sitting there at the Wayside Chapel with you, and you as my friend, and you as my, you know, co-creator, and bringing to the people something that actually was worthwhile and was deeply resonant, you know. And we spoke about grief, and we spoke about trauma, and you took us through some different practices, and that was kind of the way in which the magazine then got funded. It was like, right, let's bring in some partners, let's look at ways that we can create together, co-create together, and bring the pages to life together, as, you know, as a way of extending that to community. And that was one beautiful way that we did that together. Yes.
Yeah. Well, you know,
Mm.
there's so much more to talk about, because being human is a fairly rich experience. So, you know, let's hope that when I say please go on, our focus over here at Soul Advisor, because now our beating heart is in Angkor Grace, which is minutes from Angkor Wat, which is full of temples of healing from 900, 1,200 and beyond years ago. It's all about bringing the ancestors' voice through now. So that big catchword that all of us are seeing everywhere, remembering,
Yes.
is fundamental. So please, could you turn your mind to coming over and focusing on the Khmer history and all of the rich histories of ancestry that we've weaved over these millennia to arrive at this point. That'd be great.
I'd love Yes, I'd love to do that. And yes, it's not a place, it's not a region, it's not a it's I haven't delved into that part of the world at all, and the teachings from there. But I love that you're there, and yes, I certainly would love to play in that beautiful tradition one day.
Oh, well, everyone, it's Friday evening, and thank you so much for being amongst it all, you guys. And let's hope that many people listen to your incredible words and feel the passion that you have to bring about a revolution or a reimagining or a coming back, actually, just to who we actually are and what wellness is, which is an inherent thing for all of us. You know, it doesn't have to be commodified, does it, Hazel?
I'm calling it a reclamation.
Reclamation. Thanks. Good word.
I like
Yeah.
it. Remembering is, Suzanne Sterling, she kind of fed that she dropped that seed all those years ago. Do you remember with Off the Mat into the World? She was definitely somebody that dropped that seed for me. And in many ways, it's a bit of a love letter. It's a love letter. It's a love letter to grace, because I think we can all live in grace.
Yeah.
And the world would be
Challenge, hey? Yeah. Challenge to bring us all back to grace. Do it with grace, and the deathbed will be a lot easier. All right, everybody. Good night. Got a very needs
Thank
attention.
you, Cynthia. Thank you, Kate.
Thank you, Martine. Thanks for being with
Thank
us.
you.
Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Good
Take
night.
care.